Let's try that again. Good afternoon. Today is Tuesday, December 19th. This is the Public Health and Safety Committee. We do have a quorum with myself, Councilmember Benton, Bradford, Huffman, Nash, Prepty, and Weiner. Councilmember Kimbrough was here, and so we'll recognize her when she comes back in, and anyone else who joins us. Here she is now, Councilmember Kimbrough. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I guess as we get started, of course, want to recognize the fact that we just went through, a significant disaster in our community with the tornado that impacted Madison in particular, and other parts of Davidson County. I know Ashland City was also impacted, of course, Hendersonville, Clarksville, throughout Tennessee. So the council members that are, have been in the field navigating kind of all the challenges related to what happens when a tornado hits your community have been working very, very hard. Of course, NES, NDOT, with brush collection and all the teams coming together. So I really want to recognize them. Of course, the Office of Emergency Management, MNPD, Nashville Fire, all of our first responders. If you haven't had a chance to volunteer, of course, it's a great time. It's a great season to volunteer because as we transition into Christmas next week and then New Year's, people will start to forget that there are still survivors that need our help. So I encourage you to go to NashvilleResponds.org and also Hands on Nashville if you're interested in volunteering. And I understand Councilmember Coopin went through the disaster volunteer leader training on Monday. So I want to recognize him even though he's not on the committee because that's something that all of us on the district level in particular should be involved with because ultimately we are the ones, that need to respond as first responders are helping in our areas. So just want to point that out. So we're going to go ahead and move into our consent agenda. I do have a consent agenda. I'll read off the item numbers and the resolution numbers. So if you have something you'd like to have pulled off, I'll be able to take that information as soon as I wrap this part up. So first item that's on consent is RS 2023-131. Then we have RS 2023-143, which is item number 2, RS 2023-144, item number 3, RS 2023-145, which is item number 4, and then skipping down to item number 6, RS 2023-147. Does anybody need any of those items to come off? Councilmember Huffman.
2023-131, please.
Okay, I will remove that. Anybody else have any other items? Councilmember Prepty, hang on just a second as I find you. There you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First and foremost, let me associate myself with your comments about OEM and about the folks who have suffered from this natural disaster of this tornado. But I also want to remove item number 6, RS 2023-147.
Okay, thank you. I've got that. Anyone else have any other items to remove? Okay, I'll go ahead and start then with item number 2, which is RS 2023-143, Porterfield, Evans, Bradford, and others, accepts a grant from the Friends of Metro Animal Care and Control to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Board of Health to provide funding for emergency medical care for shelter animals and the pet pantry, a component of the Safety Net program. Item number 3, RS 2023-144, Porterfield, Evans, Bradford, and others, approves amendments 3 and 4 to a grant from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Board of Health to provide for the prevention, surveillance, diagnosis, and treatment of HIV/AIDS and to administer a Minority AIDS Initiative program. Item number 4, RS 2023-145, Porterfield, Evans, and others, approves amendments 4, 5, and 6 to a grant from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Board of Health to provide for the prevention, surveillance, diagnosis, and treatment of HIV/AIDS and to administer a Minority AIDS Initiative program. And that is it on our consent agenda. Do I have a motion? All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting? All right, we recommend approval on those items. Okay, let's go back and pick up item number 1, which is RS 2023-131. Evans, Welsh and Gadd authorizes the mayor to execute an interlocal agreement for the Northern Middle Tennessee Local Workforce Development Area in accordance with the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Do I have a motion? All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. Let me open the floor for discussion. Councilmember Huffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a couple questions in regards to this piece of legislation. I don't know if we have anyone here that could potentially field those. Mr. Sexton?
Hang on one second. Let me turn your microphone on. Which one is it? Is it administration table? Thank you.
Yes, we have Tanya Everson here from the Metro Action Commission. And also, yep.
Thank you.
Hi, Tanya Everson, Metro Action Commission, Director of Workforce and Youth.
Thank you for being here. Just a couple of questions to start with. The proportion of federal funding through the Workforce Board, what's the total that is dedicated to specifically Davidson County in this specific grant?
It's 600,000.
100,000, okay.
I think it's 595, exact number.
Okay. And a follow-up question to that one, how does that investment compare with the overall population of Davidson County compared to the other counties involved with this?
I'm not sure how much money they give to other counties. We only have a contract for youth, where other counties serve adults and people who get laid off, dislocated worker and youth. We just have a smaller contract just for Davidson County. But it's the federal money that is gone through U.S. Department of Labor, then funneled through local Tennessee Department of Labor, then goes to Northern Middle Workforce Board, which has 13 counties. And Davidson County is one of the counties, and that's why they ask all the mayors to sign the interlocal agreement, to have somebody at these board meetings that take place every quarter with the Northern Middle Workforce Board. Metro Action Commission gets the money to serve in and out of school youth all year around. It's mostly youth that have barriers, some type of barriers that are eligible for the program, and that's who we serve.
Thank you. Just a couple more, if that's okay. Sure. Currently, how are these funds being used by MAC? Could you just elaborate on that?
Sure. So we have 3 youth employment coaches who work with youth at Metro schools, that's in-school youth. We pay for the paid work experience. If you ever heard of schools talking about school-based learning, where they go and do kind of like employment during school hours, we are the ones who pay for their wages while they're in there. Also, they get career development, like career pathways advice. We do different workshops that are related to careers. Also work with out-of-school youth. That's the youth who, this is all ages 17 to 24. So out of school are the ones who probably dropped out of school, who might need assistance into getting into school, may need assistance into getting employment. These funds also cover not just the paid work experience, but for out-of-school youth, they cover schooling. So like if they need, I mean, obviously not for 4 years, but like for up to 2 years, short-term training, or they get certifications, or even like community colleges up to 2 years. And they also receive like after they get the certifications, we help them with assistance with the job, with employment as well.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That concludes my questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. All right, any other questions related to this resolution? All right. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting? Okay. All right, we recommend approval. Let's go to item number 5, which is RS 2023-146 by Porterfield and Evans, approves a Homeland Security Grant Program application from the state of Tennessee, Tennessee Emergency Management Agency, to the Metropolitan Government acting by and through the Office of Emergency Management to fund costs related to enhancing efforts to build, sustain, and deliver the capabilities necessary to prevent, prepare for, protect against, and respond to acts of terrorism. Do I have a motion? All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? All right, let me get Councilwoman Porterfield. You're recognized.
If it pleases the chair, would you like to go to someone else first? Because I have a long list of questions.
Sure, I'd be happy to take someone else's questions, but I don't know. Depends on who is going to be raising their hand to ask a question, who I go to. Okay, I will go to Councilmember Prepty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like Councilmember Porterfield, I also have a list of questions. And so, yeah, we'll just get into it. So a lot of my questions are going to be for both MNPD and for Captain Young with OEM. I sent a lot of these questions to Chief Gilder beforehand, and I appreciate him getting me a response on these. My first question for OEM is, within this grant application, it lists a couple of different deadlines, one of them being for 11/15/23. When is this grant application due?
I just spoke with the director at OEM, and if there's a deferral, we would like for this to pass tonight. But if there was a reason for deferral, we could live with that. But to answer your question directly, I would have to make that call again. But there's some items in this grant that we would like and very much need to get ordered and get here.
Could you elaborate on what those items might be?
The atmospheric monitors, those are the area arrays that we set out around large outdoor events, such as anything that might be going on at the Nissan Stadium, the New Year's Eve event will be coming up soon. Of course, this equipment wouldn't be here by then. Stuff like that, and our handheld monitors that we would use to monitor the air. Someone's home that may have a gas leak or something that they would like to know the level.
So could you talk a little bit more about atmospheric monitors? Because I'm not exactly sure what that technology is. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
They're about that big, and we set them in different locations. I'll just use Nissan Stadium for an example. If there's an event at Nissan Stadium, there would be monitors set in probably about 7 or 8 different places around the footprint of the stadium. And that monitor has got like it's got like a sniffer on it, and it's sniffing the air. And we have a team that is placed at the stadium that is on laptops that are monitoring these monitors. And if we get a hit, we know what monitor, of course, got the hit. And then we got our handheld devices. We can go to that location. We can actually go right to the source. And it's radiation in the air, chlorine, all kinds of different chemicals that could be hazardous.
That's helpful. And within this grant application, there's also been mention of robotics being used both by MNPD and OEM. Could you talk to us a little bit more about that equipment, what specifically that equipment is, and what the intended purpose for that robotic equipment would be?
If I could, I'll refer to PD for that answer.
Nice. Chris Gilder, Metro Police Department. So the robot is going to be housed at the hazardous devices unit within the MNPD. That's most people refer to as the bomb squad. It has a couple of different functionalities. One is obviously responding to HDU calls. We have year-to-date 300 hazardous device calls, because every time somebody spots a backpack that's left lying somewhere, we obviously have to make sure it's safe, it's not a device. And so it could be utilized in that capacity. It has a USAR type capacity in the sense that the mechanics of it allow it to kind of walk over things and walk up and over things that traditional bomb robots would have trouble with. That's primarily the main functions of what it does, if that answers your question.
That does, thank you. And if I could go back to OEM for a moment as well. Within the contract, it states that there would be an option for metro agencies to participate in the DHS ICE 287G program, which is for essentially delegation of immigration enforcement for localized agencies. My understanding is that MNPD does not currently participate in that program, and that's not something that is permissible within their policies, but it is something that is within this grant. So my question is, would it be a requirement for MNPD or for our local agencies, if we accept this grant, to participate in that specific immigration enforcement program?
I don't have that answer. I can get that answer quickly, but I do not think so. But I can get you that answer to that.
So, sorry, just so I'm clear on what that I don't think so is it you don't think that we would be required to participate in? Okay.
And I'm going to give you one more question, then we're going to cut over to Councilmember Porterfield.
Okay, let me select one from this. With this funding, do you anticipate utilizing some of the funding under this grant to bolster the Special Investigation Division's open source intelligence gathering apparatus?
Not on our end, no.
I'm sorry?
Not on our end, no.
Chief Fielder?
The only thing within the grant that I'm aware of that affects us is the robot. I'm not aware of anything in that grant that would touch SID.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Prepty. We'll come back to you if we've got some time.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, I'll recognize Councilmember Porterfield.
Thank you, Chair. Councilmember Prepty asked one of my questions. I'll just start with 3, and then if you could come back to me later if there's more time. First question is the EOD spot robot system. How and when will it be used? And do we already have any of these spot robots? And can they be used to neutralize threats? Or can they be programmed to have any type of use of force, such as deploying a taser or shooting a bullet?
No, first question, we do not have any of these spot robots. As I mentioned, we do have a hazardous device robot, but its mobility is different. The way it functions, it runs on a track. This is able to kind of climb over things and upstairs. No, they're not. They are used, again, for either search and rescue type functionalities, or, again, going up and getting a better look at a suspicious device. It is not a weapon. It is not used as a weapon. It is not function on its own. It is controlled by a human that's operating the mechanics of the device.
So I know that I read that they're highly customizable. So are you saying that they cannot be customized to be used in any type of force situation? Or it's not, MMPD will not have it customized to be used in any type of use of force or neutralizing?
I can tell you,
Right.
absolutely, no, we're not customizing
Okay.
this to use it as a weapon.
Okay, and then it's stated on page 105, well, actually before that, page 45 of the FEMA document, it stated equity and emergency management requires proactively prioritizing actions that reinforce cultural competency, accessibility, and inclusion, as well as reflect on the historical context of specific groups of people. It strongly suggested that there's a focus on equity and underserved communities in the community preparedness portion of the grant. That was on page 45 of the FEMA document, and then on 105 of the grant where we talked about our community preparedness. I didn't see any references to that. So what is the plan to address equity in underserved communities in the community preparedness portion?
I'll have to kick that to OEM because this is their grant, so.
Okay, thank you.
Council Lady Porterfield, will you repeat the last part of that?
Yeah, basically FEMA said that for the community preparedness and making sure the communities are prepared, it talked about making sure that that process was equitable and underserved communities are often like hit harder. And it talked about like libraries and places like that being places that could potentially be targeted. And when we are making a plan to address community preparedness, we need to focus on equity and underserved communities. But then in the actual grant, and it wasn't a requirement, they just strongly suggested it, but I don't see it in the grant. So I just wanted to know, do we have a plan to address equity and underserved communities?
Yeah, and that would, let's see, my pages are not numbered, but I think in the grant document, that would be around page 110. It's where it talks about, are you talking about where it talks about the American Civic group keeping, is that?
It's page 105 for our, on our end. It is the one, let me pull it back up here. It's under the section that
The
says
community
community
preparedness?
preparedness, yeah.
Yeah, so that would be also OEM, how they send out notification and stuff like that of a potential event like recently, the tornado. That portion of that money is for that.
Right. And FEMA specifically said that it is encouraged that we are proactively prioritizing accessibility, inclusion, and it strongly suggests that we focus on equity and underserved communities. So my question is, how are we focusing on equity and underserved communities? For example, with the tornado, those notifications don't go out in other languages. And when you have a family who only reads or speaks in another language and they get a notification in English, you know, could deaths have been prevented if people got notifications in their language? So how are we focusing on this?
Well, I think the recent event has made us more aware of the necessity to put the message out into the other languages. I noticed recently, I think recently press releases are coming out in at least Spanish. Have you been speaking with Chief Swan, Council Lady Sepulveda, about this? But I think as we go forward, this is going to help. This money will help in sending that message.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we don't gloss over FEMA specifically saying that we need to look
Right.
at equity, we need to consider equity in underserved communities.
Right.
Because the grant, our grant does not say that we're going to do that. And if we're taking their money and they're highly encouraging us to do that, we need to do that. And then my
Yeah.
last question for the moment, Chair, and this is to, I don't know if the grant writer is here, so I don't know if you can even speak to this, Mr. Young, but on page 103, it talks about the lessons that were learned from the 2020 protests. Now, I think it's problematic to lump in the protests with the courthouse fire, the Christmas bombing, and the Covenant shooting, and have it labeled as domestic violence extremism. So is it the position of the agency that protests are domestic violence extremism? I think we have to be really careful with the language that we're using, because we have to separate the protests from the fire. Those are like two separate things, right? So I just want to make sure that we are cognizant, and I'm sure you didn't write the grant, Mr. Young,
Right,
so this
right,
is,
yeah,
this is
yeah.
to go back. But we have to be very careful about the message that we're sending, because we don't want to send a message to Nashvillians that we don't appreciate their First Amendment right to be able to peacefully gather and protest. And I just think that that could be problematic. So can you speak to, it says specifically the lessons that were learned in the 2020 protests, and what are the lessons that were learned?
Well, I think what that is in the grant is, if we go back in the protest, if we go back and use that, even though it like you said, is separate from the fire, however, there was the potential of and the unknown of what is around the protest. And that's, I think the lesson learned there was we need to be prepared in an event, in case of an event, like the protest or anything. You need to set these monitors up if you have a large gathering.
And this was for the robot dogs, the robot things. It wasn't for the handheld monitors. This was specifically in the section that talked about, if I remember correctly. Let me fact check that before I say that on the record.
And the robot is, of course, PD would utilize a robot more than we would because of the bomb. But this is the city's a high-level threat. This city's highly, in its category 2 in threat. And we need to be prepared. And the robot, if y'all remember, let's go back to the anthrax threats. We was going in and getting the white powder envelopes and stuff like that in our level A hazmat suits. But you could also, the robot could be utilized to go and grab that in protection of the men and women on the street. You know, we could use the robot also. But
can MNPD address that, since the robot is being used by MNPD? Can MNPD address that part? And to be clear, I'm not saying that we should not accept the grant. I do want us to be prepared and safe. I just want to make sure that we're clear and that the community is clear on how these things are being used. Someone reached out to me and said that there was an instance where a robot dog was used to neutralize, to kill someone. So that's why I want to understand. I don't know. I'm not the expert on it. That's why I want to understand and give you all the opportunity to dispel any misconceptions or rumors or myths or whatever, so that we can make sure that we're all on the same page about what we're voting on.
So, two things. One, again, the robot is not going to be utilized as a weapon. It is a search and rescue tool and a hazardous device location and assessment tool. I didn't write the grant, so I can't speak to the language that was in there. What I can speak to is that we probably handle a demonstration or a protest on, I would say, a weekly basis, at least one, if not every other week. And we have a long history of working closely with groups that intend to demonstrate, protest, and working with them to let them accomplish their First Amendment activities. And we have no issue with that. We support that. And we do it, like I said, pretty much on a weekly basis. And I think that record probably speaks for itself there.
So then why was the 2020 protest specifically mentioned in the grant? And I understand you didn't write the grant, but I think these are questions that we need to have an understanding of. It was specifically mentioned in the grant. It was mentioned along the same lines of a Christmas bombing and a school shooting, which are these massive, dangerous events. and the 2020 protest was included in that. Those protests that y'all are talking about on a weekly basis was not included in that. Parades weren't included in that. None of other events where we've had a massive amount of people was not included. It specifically said the 2020 protest. So I would like to know why the 2020 protest was in there, and how would the robot dog have helped in the 2020 protest? And if it would, that's great. I want to know how.
Okay. Want me to get with OEM?
Whoever can answer the question. Whoever can answer the question.
Well, I can speak, I'm not sure how the robot would have helped at the 2017 protest. These monitors would have helped anytime there's a large gathering.
It wasn't in the monitor section. It was in the robot dog section. It specifically says on page 105 of the thing. So, okay, so y'all can't answer, and I don't mean any offense to y'all, but we don't have the answers. These are questions that we have to get from the person who wrote the grant. So I'm gonna sit down, Chair, and let other people ask questions, and I may have another question at the end. Thank you. I really appreciate it, Mr.
Okay.
Young. I really appreciate you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Porterfield. We're going to go to Councilmember Huffman.
Thank you, Chair. Could I get Deputy Chief Gilder for a couple of questions?
Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
Hey, no problem at all. Couple of questions regarding the robot that is the topic of discussion right now. You mentioned before that this would be utilized by the hazardous device unit, correct?
Yes.
Otherwise known as bomb squad.
That's what most people call
Yeah.
it, bomb squad, but it's technically the hazardous devices unit. Yes, sir.
As far as the device goes, how many calls, not to put you on the spot, but how many calls have you gotten in, let's just say, the last year where the bomb squad was deployed?
Year to date, we have had 300 calls for service for our bomb squad. I know last year it was about 360, I believe was the number. How many times they actually deployed a robot, I don't have that data in front of me, but it is a significant number because one of the things that we do when we have a suspicious device is rather than sending a human down to potentially, have their life threatened, we send the robot down and it can scan the device. Usually it's utilizing X-ray, and we can make a pretty quick determination of whether this is totally innocuous item, or is this something we need to spend a little more time trying to figure out if it's dangerous or not.
Okay, thank you very much. Also, just another question I was thinking about while you were talking there. The hazardous device unit, would this unit have been deployed in an instance of a mass shooting by chance?
Not in a mass shooting response. We are the robot is are sometimes used for deliberate clearing and communication in barricade type situations. So what I mean by that is if we have a suspect that is confined to an area, or we need to clear an area to see if a suspect is still inside, and we have time, there's not a present threat to individuals, then we might utilize a robot to visually clear the area and determine if it's safe to send officers in. And then if we determine the subject is in there, then they have communication capability so that we can talk to the suspect, hopefully de-escalate, negotiate and resolve the situation. In an active killer situation like you're referencing, we're not waiting. That we're not doing a slow, deliberate clear. We are going to the threat. It's like Covenant, like a lot of people saw with the body camera footage. We're going straight to the threat.
In the instance, though, that let's just say you couldn't find the shooter, maybe the shooter started and then ran and hid, then this device would come in handy there to locate the shooter potentially.
Correct, yeah. If there's not a present ongoing threat to others and we're doing a kind of a slow, deliberate clear to locate a suspect, it's a good way to do that because then you're not forcing you're not presenting a force encounter between officers and a suspect. You have the ability to de-escalate and try to safely get that subject to safely surrender.
And just a technical question about the robot. What's the range from the person that is controlling it to the device?
Do you happen to know? I don't have that. I can get that information for you, but I offhand, I don't know, just off the top of my head.
And one more technical question. The battery life, is that something is it recharged? Is it solar powered? How does that work?
My understanding is it's rechargeable. I don't know if it has a solar charging also capability, but it's a rechargeable battery. I don't have the exact time between charges, but I would say it's fairly significant.
90 minutes?
Okay, awesome.
Thank you. Okay, that's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Huffman. We're going to go to Councilmember Nash, if I can find his button. There we go.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think we may be focusing too much on any particular incident. But like the shooting, we don't know if there's going to be a secondary device somewhere. They lure police in. So having this equipment available can help us make sure we're ready to respond if there's indications of that. Just here at the courthouse, there's nothing that says somebody couldn't have also bombed this courthouse when that, not the protest, but the post-protest got out of hand, where they tore down street lights out here and everything and burned the courthouse. Is there a possibility that someone in that group could have had a bomb? I think we need to be prepared for those things. Single incident isn't always the end of it.
Thank you, Councilmember Nash. I'm going to take, we'll take one more question from Councilmember Prepty, and then if Councilmember Porterfield has one, we'll catch her. But then we're going to need to move on because we've got guests and we've got another piece of legislation to get through. Hang on one second. There you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question's for OEM. So on page 101 of the grant application, it discusses sort of just intelligence gathering. Could you talk to us more about what OEM's intelligence gathering apparatus looks like as it relates to doing those critical threat assessments for large events? And does OEM have any policies as it relates to the collection and retention of First Amendment related data? So about like people who are in specific types of civic groups and associates and things like that. Could you talk to that, please?
Yeah, so I'm going to use a Titans event or a Nissan Stadium event for an example. We get a EAP, a plan of that event for every event that goes on there. And also, if there's any kind of threat that might be associated with that event. A lot of times there is a message that may have come through by something on social media or something, email that such and such is going to happen there. And most of the time, nothing happens. It's just a threat. But we've got to treat that as it is going to happen, right? So we prepare ourselves for the threat, and in preparing ourselves is exactly what's in this grant here. This equipment prepares us for that.
So my question is more about that preparation step of identifying those threats. Within OEM's office, is there any, like, do you all have an apparatus for collecting that type of intelligence, doing preemptive searches that could potentially collect First Amendment related activity? So if there is a protest plan for the Diane Nash Plaza here, is OEM doing searches to determine whether or not there is any credible threat? Okay.
No, we're just prepared in case something reaches outside of that First Amendment protest or that peaceful protest. No, to answer your question, no, we're not gathering, no.
Thank you, Councilmember Prepty. Councilmember Porterfield.
Thank you so much, Chair. My last question is around the pneumatic and electric tools that will be purchased. I think this is around page 101 or 102 of the grant. And if you could tell us what those are, and then it talked about a real-time crime and local fusion center, a real-time crime center and a local fusion center. Is that OEM or is that something different?
The pneumatic tools and the, what'd you say, the battery-operated equipment?
Pneumatic tools and electric tools.
Yeah. Yes, now that would be part of OEM. That would be like, pneumatic would be our hydraulic equipment, like refers to Jaws of Life, the spreaders, that kind of thing. That would be your pneumatic equipment.
What is the fusion center? It says a local real-time crime center and local fusion center.
I'm not familiar with that. That could be another department.
Okay. Okay, Chair, I would like to make a motion for a one-meeting deferral. And to be clear, I support this. I think that everything they've said is great. We need these tools. We want our first responders to have the things that they need to do to keep both them safe as well as keeping the community safe. So this is not a deferral not in support. This is just a deferral to get a few more questions answered. And Mr. Young, if it's okay, I can get with you directly to just get those questions to you. But I did have a few more questions that I think we need to clear up before we can move forward with a vote. So I would like to move for one meeting deferral.
Okay, so we have a motion for a one-meeting deferral. Do I have a second? All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. Do we have any discussion on the deferral? All right, let me go to Councilmember Weiner. Hang on just a second. I can't see you on the screen. All right, Councilmember Weiner.
Let me preface this with, I'm going to do my best to maintain my composure. I'm Jewish. I was quietly putting my grandson in the car Sunday to take him to Sunday school. And Sunday school was called off. Want to know why? A bomb threat. We need this bill. We need this grant. If the reason for the deferral is absent a reason to decline to support this bill, then there is no reason not to move forward with this bill. That's all I'm going to say right now. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Weiner, thank you. Let me get Councilmember Prepty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm rising in support of the deferral, not because I'm seeking to not vote for this bill. I intend to vote for this grant and to make sure that we have the resources that we absolutely need. Because I firmly recognize the critical threats that Nashville is facing. I also firmly recognize that we must make sure that if you all noticed, a lot of my questions that I was asking went towards that intelligence gathering, making sure that we're able to identify those threats. Because Nashville is continuing to face increasing threats, especially from the rise and continued normalization of white nationalism. White nationalism is, bar none, the largest threat to our national security. And I firmly believe that we must make sure that we have the resources so that we can do that intelligence gathering, so that we can identify those threats, preempt those threats, and make sure that we are protecting every single citizen within our city and county. That is crucial to me. One of our most imperative duties is to make sure that our communities are safe. I just want to make sure that we are doing everything within the constitutional bounds that are required of us, and making sure that we have those policies in place to make sure that we are doing these things the right way. In the first meeting that we had, I said what we do is just as important as how we do it. And I want to make clear that that is what my intent is in supporting this deferral.
Thank you, Councilmember Prepty. Any other discussion on the deferral motion? Okay, let's go ahead and take the vote. If you could raise your hand, since I know we'll have some no's on this. All those in favor of a one-meeting deferral with a re-referral back to public health and safety? No. Do you want to, I mean, I'm adding that in there, but really, do you want to have a, it will, okay, perfect. All those in favor of a one-meeting deferral? We've got 1, 2, 3. Okay, and we've got 5. All those opposed to a one-meeting deferral? And I'm 6. All right. The deferral motion fails. Anyone not voting? Okay. So the deferral motion fails, so we're back on the legislation. All those in favor of RS 2023-146, please raise your hand. And I'm 8. All those opposed? Anyone not voting? Okay, we've got 2, 3, okay. 8 in favor, 0 against, 3 abstentions. All right, thank you very much. Let's move on to RS 2023-147 by Porterfield and Evans. Accepts the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant from the Office of Justice Programs to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Police Department for specialized training and equipment to ensure personnel maintain needed certifications for criminal investigation and crime reduction initiatives. All those, or do I have a motion? It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, Councilmember Prepty.
My apologies, Madam Chair. We're on RS 2023-147.
Yes, sir.
With regards to this, this is a grant through the DOJ specifically for training. Then I had a question that I referred to Chief Gilder earlier today with regards to K-9 units, because this grant provides for the purchasing of those K-9 units. And the information that I was provided earlier was that there are currently 19 patrol dogs, and that they are trained in apprehension, and some are trained in narcotics detection, and conducting article searches. And so my question for my follow-up question for Chief Gilder on this is, what is the service span for a K-9 unit, and what is MNPD's anticipated need for purchasing more?
I guess, can you tell me what you mean by service span? I'm not sure what you mean.
Yeah, how long will a K-9 unit be in service before he has to be retired?
Oh, I got you.
Or before? Yeah.
Well, really, it depends on the dog. I would say average lifespan, work span, we probably get maybe 8-ish, roughly, on average years out of a dog, because it takes several years of training to get the dog to the point where they're fully trained and reliable. Obviously, they're going through constant training on a monthly basis, and then usually once they get it up in age around 9 or 10 years old, they're starting to experience, medical issues that necessitate their retirement.
And then, sorry, I had a question. I'm blanking on it really quickly. Anybody else has a question, I'd love to pause really quickly so I can try and think of what I was going to ask. No?
I think you're it on this one. If you, is it something you could take offline if you can't remember?
If I could have just a 30-second indulgence.
Sure. While you're actually, Councilmember Nash will go ahead and recognize you.
Just for some of our new members, the Edward Byrne Grant, it's an annual grant. They were handing these out back when I was in planning. We were talking 15 years ago. It's an annual thing that we renew that provides, again, training monies for dogs and the like.
Councilmember Prepty, did you remember?
I did, yes. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councilmember Nash. I was reviewing MNPD's policy with regards to the use of canines and within the use of force continuum. Are the use of canines for apprehension, as far as you understand, are use of canines for apprehension considered a use of deadly force?
No, they are not trained to deploy deadly force. They are trained to bite areas of the body that would not present a deadly threat.
Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? All right. All those in favor of RS 2023-147, please raise your hand. All right. Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting? Okay. I counted 8. Oh, actually 9 with me. All right. Okay. We're going to transition into our guests really quickly. Before we do that, though, is there anybody here from the Metro Health Department? Okay, I won't have time to recognize you today, but if you or Mr. Sharp at our January 16th meeting, we had got some questions. Councilmember Porterfield and I talked about the news story about syphilis increasing in Nashville, and so we'd like to hear a little bit more about Metro Health strategies around syphilis and mitigation of that. And so if you're able to add that to your list of things to think about over the holidays, I would appreciate it. We're going to go ahead next, and we will hear from Metropolitan Social Services about the 2023 Know Your Community Report. Yeah. Yes, how are you, Ms. Pratt? Okay, I know I turned on 2 of your microphones. I'm not sure which one up here is the third potentially, but hopefully we'll be able to. All right, very good.
Great. Great.
Go ahead. We've got Director Pratt. It was going to kick us off.
Good evening. I'm Renee Pratt, Executive Director of Metro Social Services. We are extremely excited about being with you this evening to introduce to you our 6th edition of our Know Your Community Socio-Demographic Economic Information Profile of the Davidson County area. This document lists 35 demographics on all councilmatic districts here in the city. If you'd like additional information after our presentation, please feel free to reach out to us. We can provide the complete report along with any particular information you might need as it relates to your district. At this time, I'd like to introduce who I have with me today. To my left, to my right, far right, is Abdegani Barre. He is the Director of Strategic Planning and Research. Dr. Garrett Harper, he's Planning Analyst for Strategic Planning and Research for Metro Social Services. And if you'd indulge me, in the back of the room, we have 2 other employees, Jeff Wamble, who's a Planning Analyst, and Will Bassett, who's a Planning Analyst as well. At this time, I'd like to introduce Abdegani Barre. Thank you.
Thank you, council members, for allowing us to join and share with you this document. This is the 6th edition that we produce it, and it's intentionally produced for Metro Council. This is a document that is intended to highlight the need in the community and each district, council district. And I want you to know that although we have the report being released next week, it contains a lot of maps and tables. So we wanted just to share with you what those tables mean. And I think it asks critical questions related about public investments that we make in education, in workforce training, in housing, and all other things that are so relevant to this community. So I would like now to welcome Dr. Garrett Harper to share with you the presentation.
Thank you, council members.
And I'm not sure if that middle one, let me see if I can get that one to turn on. I'm not sure if I can or not.
Thank you, members of council and members of the Public Health and Safety Committee. It's a pleasure to share with you data on Know Your Community. The title of this really speaks importantly to what the nature of the document is about. It is drawn from U.S. Census data, the most recent American Community Survey data. We've intended for this to be a very user-friendly document. This is just a snapshot of some of the things that are in that, which we'll be going through relatively quickly. We have developed the maps in partnership with Dr. Wansu M., who is the director of the GIS Center at Meharry Medical College. As Abdegani mentioned, there are 3 major topic areas. Those are the economic, the housing, and the demographic and social characteristics. And we'll take a look at a few of these first. Advance.
Maybe I can do it from here. Yeah.
What? So this is the first of the maps in the demographic and socioeconomic series, and a couple of suggestions just in terms of thinking about these that seem helpful ones, to examine the maps and think about any places where there are patterns, where there are clusters of activity, or where perhaps there is not a cluster of activity in a particular variable. The other things to think about are those cases where a district, an individual district, may be rather different from the districts around it in terms of the variable that's being examined, or whether it's rather different from the county average. And we'll be seeing a table in just a few moments which shows how the county averages are portrayed as well. This first map shows the percent of single-family householders with children under age 18. And as you see, this is one that illustrates that in the southwestern portion of the county, those districts have relatively a smaller share of single female householders with children under 18. You can see in the legend that those are between 1% and 3%. Scattered in the remainder of the county, that rises to as high as 8 up to 15% at the highest. These, in each of the maps, these are in equal increment intervals, so these are each time showing the 7 highest council districts for a variable, the 7 lowest, and the 7 in the 3 spaces in between those as well. The next map shows the percent of population age 65 and over with a disability. In the most recent year, Metropolitan Social Services focused one of its other reports, the Community Needs Evaluation, on the costs and challenges of older Nashvillians in Nashville. This is one of those areas that became very important as we looked at that topic, and here that's revealed in the data. This is one that exhibits where there is not a pattern, as you can see, which raises the questions Abhigani mentioned as well about asking critical questions, that this may cause one to wonder, well, why isn't there a pattern? The why behind it, and the why behind it may be that those are places of concentration of older population in larger numbers. The next one shows the percent of population age 3 and over who are enrolled in public school. We've included this in the last 3 of our publications, Know Your Community, and it's really quite interesting in terms of what the variation is, from as low as 14% in one of the districts of persons who are attending school, who are of school age, who are attending public school, to as high as 91%. In the highest. And as you see, there's a concentration again in the southwestern quadrant of the county. So it's useful to think about patterns such as this and patterns that recur from one map to another and one data set to another. This is also one that's timely and interesting for Nashville, and it's the percent of population that lived in the same house a year ago as the way the census collects data. So as we would look at that lowest increment there of 63 to 76%, those are persons, those are districts where relatively fewer people lived in the same house in the previous year, indicating that those are places where there had been a lot of in-migration, people moving in from outside of the area. And you can see how that is really clustered primarily in the center of the county. We look at the diversity issues of our population, racial and ethnic makeup of the districts. Here, the percent Black or African American population. We see some of the patterns that are revealed in that from some districts where there's quite low single-digit representation, others as reaching up to 68%. As well, the Hispanic or Latino population is featured, and that from low single digits to 39% at the highest. So the first set of characteristics are the demographic. The second then are the economic, and these are ones that are very important to the well-being, the social and economic well-being of the population of Nashville. One of the features also of our community needs evaluation. One of the data points that's very important to that is the median household income. And we prefer to use median in illustrating this more often because it's showing that half of the population is above a particular variable point and half of the population is below that, rather than a mean or an average, which can be more easily skewed. So this is showing the median household income of the districts throughout the county, from a low of 43,000 to a high of 142,000. So we can see there that range is approximately 3 times greater for the highest from the lowest. And we also see a pattern that is revealed there, primarily in the southwestern part of the county, as well as some others that are shown. Somewhat similar to this, then, are the median worker earnings, here from 34,000 at the lowest. And you can see how those increments are sort of clustered in the lower ranges, 34 to 42, 42 to 45, 45 to 53, shown there in the legend. But then in the higher groups, there's quite a large range. For instance, that last one's from 62 to 99. So this would be another place where using that document and drilling down into what the data tables show provides a lot more insight on a particular council district. The next one is an area that we work a great deal with as we work with population who experience economic hardships in Nashville. And those are the percent that are unemployed, and essentially the unemployment rate. So this is revealing that in the lowest, the districts with the lowest, there is 1.7 to 3% of the population that is unemployed, rising up to 9%. But that really is not the full story. So this is the one occasion where, as we see in the next slide, this is what the tables look like. And we didn't want to just put all the tables out there. The document itself is about 60 pages long. It has many of the maps which we're sharing with you here this evening, but it also has tables that accompany each of this that provide a great deal more depth of insight and information around this. So as we saw on the map just prior, that pertains to what is the third column from the left on this. And since this is the first table, that third column from the left says that's the population 16 and over, those of working age, labor force participation, and then the third column, unemployment rate. So there we would see that 1.7 up to 9%. So that was represented in that map. 9% is a high rate, but not as high as what it is for segments of the population within those districts. So as we would move across that table, you would see at the top there, first the population 16 years and over, then females 20 to 64 years with children under 18. As you see the unemployment rate in that column, it starts to rise up to 13, 20, 23, 21. Moving further to the right is the population with any disability. There, the unemployment rates are also in the teens and the 20%. Population with less than a high school graduation level, those are also heightened levels. So it's a way to really dig into this. The maps provide a great way of illustrating the spatial arrangement of this to show patterns. Also in these tables, as you'll see, each column is shaded such that you can pretty easily see where the highs and the lows are, because there are 100 numbers on that page. Trying to make sense of it without color as a guide can be challenging. So this is intended to be really user-friendly and a help in sorting through that data. So the unemployment rate in the map prior, but then unemployment quite higher for segments of the population in each of those districts. The next is the mean household retirement income, again, because we've put a special focus on the older Nashvilleian population. And here we also see some of those similar patterns across the county. But it also shows that there's quite a range in that as well, from some households living in retirement earning as little as $12,000 a year to others where that is as high as $53,000 a year. Next is another very timely topic for us, the percentage of population commuting 45 minutes or more to work, and that's a one-way commute. So this is telling us that in the lowest area, which is primarily in central South Davidson County, those districts, 2.7 to 7% of the population spend 45 minutes or more traveling. Not a great deal. But as that moves up to the periphery of the county, we see that there are a number of counties, 7 here that are shown in that highest level, where up to a quarter of the workers are spending 45 minutes driving one way to work. So there are some patterns that can really reveal relationships here between some of these other variables that are shown in this as well. The percent of population below poverty, also some clustering effects in the center of the county, a bit in the southeast. This is one that shows relatively low levels of poverty at 5%, 8%, rising, however, up to 19 to 27% in the highest increment. This is one also where we've included on the next slide the table that accompanies this, because similar to the unemployment rate, while the rates overall in a particular district may not rise higher than 9% for unemployment, we saw in that example that unemployment rates for particular groups of population can be quite high. Similarly for poverty, where the poverty rate is in the mid-teens for the county, we see here in this table, in the very top left of this table, 15% was the poverty rate for Davidson County and what flows down through each of the other 35 districts. But as we move across that table, up at the top, the headings, population under 18 years, well, that starts to rise into the 20% or even as high as 74%, 56% for persons who are under 18. Persons who are 65 and over, that can be quite a higher level. Families with children under 18, and female householder with children under 18, and that one really has some startling examples in it where poverty rates are at extremely high levels in quite many of the districts in Davidson County. And just as an addendum to that, here is included the poverty guidelines for 2023 from the federal government. These are ones that apply to all states in the United States except Alaska and Hawaii. So in all places, rich or poor, rural or urban, these are those thresholds that are used by the federal government. So one person in a family or household would need to earn in excess of $14,580 to be not in poverty. So that's essentially saying a person earning $15,000 a year living alone is not experiencing poverty. So just to recognize that the poverty thresholds themselves, as they're established at the federal level, are quite low, and some of the other dynamics that are discussed in our community needs evaluation in recent years have taken up issues of living wage poverty and how there are other metrics that can be useful in determining persons who are experiencing economic hardship. This map is showing the population age 65 and over below poverty. Here we see rather a concentration in the interior of the county, where the portion of that population experiencing poverty rises to as high as 28%, 1 in 4 older persons, older households. And then the last and third of the sections of this document relates to housing. And the first of those maps that we've shared is median owner housing value, here from approaching about $200,000 to in excess of $800,000, so multiples of 2 and 3 times from the lowest to the highest in this, and some rather apparent clustering that is shown here in the southwest and the southern part of the county with the higher owner housing values. The next of these is one that is an important set of metrics for homeowners, and we'll see in a moment for renters, and those are persons who are considered cost burdened. If a household is spending more than a third of its annual income on housing costs, it's determined to be cost burdened. And here in this map, we show persons who do have a mortgage and who are paying mortgage costs that represent more than 35% of their household income. Those are displayed in this map, and here we see some patterns, a bit of sorting across the county there, so it's not all clustered into one area. And it is also important to think that there are persons who may have relatively high incomes and high mortgages and are paying considerable amounts of their income, but are not necessarily economically experiencing hardship, even though technically they would be spending a large part of their income for this. The median monthly mortgage payment is the next of those, here from a little over $1,000 a month to over $3,000, again, several multiples over. This one, some fairly clear clusters that are shown. And then lastly on this, the topic of renters in Nashville, and this is that is showing persons who are renters that are cost burdened, paying more than a third of their income for monthly rent. This is rather not a pattern that is in a cluster but scattered throughout the county, where we may think that there may be larger numbers of rental units, more of an apartment area. They may be ones as well where persons with higher levels of income are paying higher levels of rent and are cost burdened, although not financially as impacted as others. And then lastly, the median monthly rent here from a little under $1,000 to approaching $2,000 a month from the American Community Survey data that we use to work to develop into these maps. So this is the compilation of data that we've provided for the most recent Know Your Community. We've provided it in past years to be a resource for policymaking for, again, exactly as the term of the title says, know your community, know all of the 35 communities and have some depth to be able to pull those apart and to examine some of the patterns that are displayed in that. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. This is really informative, and I'd love to take any questions from anybody attending who has them. Councilmember Porterfield.
Thank you, Chair. I just have one quick question. Is it Bari?
Yeah.
Bari. Excellent presentation. Thank y'all so much for the data. I love when this comes out every year because I'm a little bit of a data nerd and I love digging deep and looking at this. So I appreciate this. You presented to the Minority Caucus at some point last term, and there was something that I remember you sharing with us, and I'm not sure if it's in this particular report, but it was about like the economic mobility, and it was essentially that children born into poverty in Nashville die into poverty because of the lack of economic mobility. Is that in this report at all? And if not, is that something y'all could briefly speak to, or something that y'all could even email me so that I could just have that data? And I think that's important information for the body to have.
In this particular report, we don't have that this time. But what I can tell you is that nothing has changed much in Nashville since we released that report. I believe it was 2019. If you look at the maps that we show today, if you look at, there's a pattern where the most unemployed live, the most people in poverty, and also most single parents that have got children, they live all that. If you look at, there is the idea that all you need to do is just to get education and then you will be moving. That's not exactly true. And we say that when you look at this. And one more thing that I want you to add is that every year we look at how many children born in Davidson County to people who are on Medicaid, TennCare. I mean, in Tennessee, you have to be so poor to get TennCare. About 3,000 children are born every year to mothers who are on Medicaid. What that says is that in 4 or 5 years, they will be coming to our school system. And children who come to school with a lot of baggage in terms of being born in the most violent neighborhood that has got highest poverty rate, highest unemployment rate, it shows the challenge that we face even in the school. In that report, we demonstrated that only 1 out of 5 of MNPS graduates are able to graduate and enroll in college and complete it. So you see the challenge, we're talking about mobility. If only 1 out of 5 children are able to enroll in that. So, and the reason we were showing this also as part of that mobility is that we recruit businesses to come to Davidson County. If I show you the map of unemployment again, and you look at that, and starting from Whites Creek area all the way coming to Dickerson Road and coming to Shelby and then going to southeast, you would ask and say, people who live in those neighborhoods, how much educational attainment they have reached. You will find that's where also most people that have got less than high school diploma live in. And then you would say, then do you really think companies that we recruited, like Oracle, Amazon, the jobs that they offer, they don't qualify to. So who is benefiting when you say we're recruiting business to Davidson County and we're offering TIF incentives, those kind of things? So that's why we wanted people to look at the maps and see not just about what we can see, but also the potential out there, which is if we don't have enough talent in terms of workforce in Davidson County, so that means that we are importing workforce from other states And if you look at a while ago, the map that showed about people who have lived in that district for less than a year, those are the area that you see high Airbnb construction and high young people, talented, coming from either California, Illinois, or other states that have got the talent that the companies we recruited for brought with them. So that still increases gentrification and other things. So all of those things combined, Council Lady, what it does is that it keeps people not to have any accessibility to mobility. So although we haven't done it in this year, but when you combine all of these things, it does. And we know that the council members don't have staff of their own. If you make a request and you say, I need that to be investigated for us, that's something that we can do for you.
Thank you. Can y'all investigate that and share that information with the council? And can you also include a recommendation on what the council can do to help mitigate this issue, such as what type of investments will be vital for us to make sure that we are taking care of our constituencies in this regard? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that great question, Councilmember Porterfield. How about any other questions? Okay, Councilmember Nash, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I certainly understand, for instance, the Oracle business. The business itself doesn't necessarily draw, or for those that don't have a good education, they're not going to get necessarily the highest paying jobs, but they bring with them construction jobs as they build out, service jobs that are needed to maintain buildings and the like. Is that of any help? Are you seeing any of that? I attended a Christmas party for a flooring business the other day, and there were 40 people in there, and half of them did not speak English. These are people that are really working hard in the trades, and I'm wondering if we're doing enough to provide upward mobility through the trades.
There is a recognition in workforce development. I know we have others here who have worked in workforce development in the audience as well, that there's a gap in terms of middle skill jobs, middle skill workforce, and an emphasis on those. And that's a space where there are persons who are more than high school but less than college graduates. And those are the kinds of careers that do have a lot of earning potential and mobility. And not only in Nashville, but across the country, that's been a space that hasn't been as robustly addressed as it might have. And we're not alone in Nashville in doing that. But from the sort of the low-end service jobs where you only need a high school diploma or less, those are not very strong jobs for mobility. But those middle skill ones, some of the ones which you're mentioning there, are the kinds of ones, and really putting an emphasis on those for, as Abdegani mentions, that based on ACT scores, on ASVAB scores, that only about 20% of graduates from MNPS are prepared to go on to any type of post-secondary education. That really becomes a further reason to think about the emphasis on that, whatever that can be post-graduation, to position people into those middle skill jobs. So it really is an important point.
Thank you, Councilmember Nash. I can take one more question, and then we're going to have to wrap it up. Any other questions? Councilmember Harrell.
Madam Chair, are we able to have this presentation sent to us via email?
Director Pratt is shaking her head yes. Great question. All right. With that, I really want to appreciate Metro Social Services, Director Pratt and the team for being here. This is one of the best reports that we get. It's a great way to kind of dig into your district and learn a lot more about what's happening. In addition, and it provides great data to connect with the anecdotal information that we're often exposed to kind of at our level. So I encourage you to reach out to the team when you receive the email if you have any questions about the data, the tables, their collection methods, all that good stuff if you have any. Unfortunately, our next presenter, we're not going to be able to hear tonight because we've run out of time, and that is April Calvin and Bill Clendenning from the Office of Homeless Services with their update related to ARP funding and their strategies for mitigating homelessness in Nashville. And I really apologize that we ran out of time, and so we will make it up to you on January the 16th at our next meeting, and I promise that we will start with you at our next meeting, so that way we can get caught up on where things stand. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.